All right. Abril, would you check YouTube? I believe we are live. All right. Good evening and welcome to the District 17 Legislative Virtual Town Hall meeting. I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and I am really thrilled and proud to work with and partner with Delegate Julie Palakovich Carr, Delegate Joe Vogel, and Delegate Ryan Spiegel. This evening, the plan is to make sure that we are giving you an update on our legislative agenda. Yesterday at noon, the Senate and House came into session, went into session for a 90-day session, and we are going to be busy. There's a lot going on, and you're going to learn a lot. We're going to try to talk fast, and thank you to everybody who submitted questions. We will look forward to answering as many of those as we have time, but we do not want to be done at midnight here. So I just want to reiterate that this is a legislative town hall. This is not campaign. We are not going to be talking about whom to vote for or anything about that. This is about what we're doing for the next now 88 days. So legislative matters, and that's what our conversation is going to be about. So you'll hear from each of the four of us. We will then answer some of the questions that were submitted in advance. And so before we start, anyone, can we get going? Anything that I've forgotten to say in the intro? Okay, so we're going to kick off. Delegate Joe Vogel is going first, and I'm putting you in the spotlight, even though the poor thing is not up to his normal Joe Vogel strength. Poor thing is a little bit sick. So
I'm a
Joe,
little under the weather. We'll be okay.
kick us off.
Well, thank you, Senator. And if I sound congested now, you know why. It's great to see you all today. And I just have to start by saying thank you. We're going into my fourth legislative session here as a delegate. And I know that I would not be here without the support that so many of you have showed me and the trust that you've given me. And I am just really grateful and hoping to make you all proud going into this fourth legislative session. We're gathered here in Annapolis at a time when we are seeing extreme chaos and cruelty at the federal level of our government. And the attacks that we're seeing in particular on our immigrant communities, I've had the chance over the last many months to hear from many of our neighbors who are just absolutely terrified. And this cruelty and this chaos is something that we all understand. And I am confident that it'll be the priority issue going into this legislative session. And I'm hopeful that before we go back home in April, that we will finally ban 287G agreements in the state of Maryland, and that we will
Which
take
are?
action 287G agreements, which are partnerships between ICE and local law enforcement, which last year we only had two of in the state, and now we have, I believe, upwards of eight, where we're using local resources to carry out the work of ICE, which is not the work of law enforcement, and creates distrust between law enforcement and local communities. And we will take action on ICE agents wearing masks, covering their identities, walking down the streets, terrorizing our neighbors. The federal government is also abdicating responsibilities when it comes to public health, to consumer protections, to environmental protections, to workers' rights. And we understand, I know this team here and many of the legislators here in this chamber, we understand the urgency of this moment and we're prepared to meet it. And I know that all four of us will work as hard as we can over the next 90 days to counter the chaos and cruelty that we're seeing. At a time when the federal government is so chaotic, I think Maryland can and must continue to be an example of good government, restoring that trust in democracy and that confidence in government, and that's what we'll do. I also recognize that we have a president who ran on the promise of affordability, of making life more affordable, not just for Marylanders, but for all Americans, and has done anything but. Groceries are more expensive, utilities are more expensive, housing is more expensive, healthcare is now more expensive thanks to the expiration of these ACA subsidies, which we worked on last legislative session, and I'm sure we'll continue to work on the issue of affordable healthcare. We now must step up and address this crisis of affordability that so many families in our communities are experiencing. And lastly, and I know that my colleagues are going to talk about this, and many of you have heard about this already, we really have a deficit issue, again, once again, a deficit crisis here in the state of Maryland. over $1 billion, in large part because of the impact of the federal government, the layoff of federal workers, the impact of the budget bill that was passed by Congress. And so, yes, we have to address that issue. I'm sure my colleagues will talk about that. And we also have to address that with a real plan around economic development that makes us not fully dependent on just the federal government and federal jobs, but expand and diversify beyond that so that we can move beyond this continuous cycle of budget deficits. I'm staying busy this session. I'm introducing 29 bills. 24 of those bills have already been pre-filed. And I just want to quickly go around. And first, I want to thank my team. I don't know if Sean's on here yet, my chief of staff, who has been working very hard over in the last few months, getting those bills ready for this session. And then like every year, many of these bills are brought to me by constituents, some of you on this call. And I'm proud to be working with many of you on those bills. Jason Spiegel, who I saw earlier, we're working on legislation to fund the Veterans Trust Fund, which provides resources to veterans experiencing a range of different emergencies. And we're pulling money from cannabis sales, cannabis revenue in the state of Maryland, 3% of that revenue. So that for the first time, that Veterans Trust Fund is actually getting government funding and not just optional voluntary funding. To Mayor Ashton and Stacy Kapowitz, I know the mayor couldn't join us today. She's on official business, but we're working together on legislation to incentivize the construction of housing for educators in our state, attract more educators, and in particular, those early stage, early career educators who have a hard time being able to afford to live in the communities that they work in. Laura Mitchell, who might be on, and many of the student advocates who I actually think my chief of staff is on a call with right now. We're working on legislation to remove penalties for students that want to carry Narcan in schools to help maybe one of their classmates if they have an overdose. But in many counties across the state, they can actually get suspended for that or get detention for carrying that Narcan. So we have to change that. To Councilmember Hernandez and Councilmember Van Grack, who I'm sure are on, tackling the issue of rental junk fees, where renters are facing even on top of expensive rents, even more in a range of different fees that make their monthly rent even more expensive. To those constituents who I'm working with on a standard policy statewide for therapy dogs in our public schools, the residents of Asbury, I'm sure we have some on today, who I'm working with to ensure greater accountability and transparency for our retirement communities. Had a productive meeting on that earlier today. To those of you who I'm working with to ban anti-union captive audience meetings, we got that bill passed through the House last year. We got to get it passed the Senate this year, and I'm confident that we will. And lastly, just briefly in a minute, I mentioned affordability at the top, and I think it's important for us as Democrats to really put forward a credible affordability agenda, given that the promise of the Trump administration has just been a complete lie. So I'm introducing a range of different bills to address the issue of affordability, to make life more affordable for Maryland families. That includes the bill on rental housing that I mentioned earlier. It includes the issue of surveillance pricing. There was a report done recently by More Perfect Union where corporations are increasingly using personal data to try to set different prices for different consumers. So they know how much you need a product, how much you like a product, and then they can charge you accordingly. And we're seeing that now with Instacart. Instacart, after there was an investigation into Instacart's use of surveillance pricing, Instacart said we're no longer doing that. But there are plenty of other businesses, supermarkets that are still considering using surveillance pricing. And one of my least favorite example is perhaps your Uber app or your Lyft app when you're going to book a ride and there's research that shows that if your battery is dropping, that they start charging you more because they know that you're more desperate for an Uber ride. So tackling the issue of surveillance pricing is really important now with the rise of artificial intelligence. I have legislation to address the monopolization of supermarkets and pharmacies to end the issue of distributor price discrimination. That was something that the Biden administration, the Federal Trade Commission, attempted to do. And then Pepsi was being sued by the FTC, by the federal government, and then Pepsi gave $500,000 to Trump's inaugural fund, and they are no longer being sued by the federal government. And lastly, just on the issue of wages, we're seeing just an increase in corporate greed now, explosive increase in corporate greed that are not only raising prices, but also lowering wages. So a number of bills that I'm sponsoring to strengthen the rights of unions, to set minimum payments for Uber and Lyft drivers who Uber and Lyft rides might be getting more expensive, but Uber and Lyft drivers are getting a smaller and smaller share of that pay, to ban trap repayment agreements where workers are forced into these agreements where if they want to quit their job, they end up owing thousands of dollars in training fees, which keeps them trapped, literally trapped at their work. It's the trap ban, is what we're calling it. And then lastly, and I'll end with this, a bill that I'm introducing again this year, which would look to raise the threshold of which workers qualify for overtime compensation, which salaried workers qualify for overtime compensation, in line with what the Department of Labor attempted to do under the Biden admin, but was struck down by a Trump-appointed federal judge. So we're going to be busy over these next 90 days, but as always, my door is open, and I look forward to not only working with my incredible colleagues here, Delegate Spiegel, Delegate Palakovich Carr, and Senator Kagan, but also all of you to get big things done for District 17 this year.
Nicely done. Thank you, Delegate Vogel. And again, we are so sorry you're not feeling up to snuff, but hopefully you will recuperate over the weekend and be ready on Monday. Next up, we have, sorry, I have, all right. Next up is our wonderful delegate Ryan Spiegel. We call him our baby delegate, which he loves endlessly. He is on the Appropriations Committee, and so he is going to talk a lot about the budget and all the numbers we're dealing with now. Delegate Spiegel, welcome. You're up.
Thank you, Senator. And I just want to start also by thanking my delegation team and everybody here who is participating on the town hall. Every time we come back to Annapolis at the beginning of a session and I talk with colleagues from across the state and I reconnect with them, I'm reminded how fortunate we are to represent a district like 17 with engaged and vibrant and diverse communities, with partners in two well-run municipalities within our district. Um, and as I think was mentioned, Mayors Ashman and Ashton send their regrets that they couldn't be here because of some municipal business. But we are really, really fortunate to represent District 17. And so I just want to say thank you for the privilege to be part of this team and to represent you. As Delegate Vogel touched upon, there is a litany of horrible abuses by the Trump administration, from ICE to politicized prosecutions to foreign policy, but we really don't have enough time to address all of them tonight. But as the resident member of the Appropriations Committee on our District 17 delegation, I'm going to talk about the state's budget landscape and budget outlook, which has also yet again been unnecessarily put at risk by the irresponsible fiscal and tax policies of the Trump White House, including, as you all know, mass layoffs of now 25,000 federal workers in Maryland, efforts to withhold federal funding for Medicaid, medical research, education, clean energy projects, which have been canceled, tax changes in what we are calling the one big ugly bill, tariffs, shutting down the government for over a month, and many other actions that are driving the dramatic spike in the cost of living that Delegate Vogel mentioned, on everything from groceries to cars. And I just read that the average price of a new car is now more than $50,000. And of course, as Marylanders are struggling with all of these costs, the president is saying that the issue of affordability is a fake hoax. Now, under our state constitution, there's really only one thing that the General Assembly is required to do every year, and that is pass a budget. And I'll note that it must be a balanced budget, unlike Congress, which runs massive deficits and racks up trillions of dollars in debt. Now, as some of you may recall, last year we entered the legislative session facing a $3.5 billion budget shortfall, which was made even worse by the White House's cruel and indiscriminate cuts. But we managed to balance our budget with a combination of $2 billion in difficult cuts and another $1.5 billion in targeted revenues. And we actually ended the last fiscal year with a surplus of about 400 or 500 million. But because of the events that unfolded over the summer and the fall, we are unfortunately now facing another shortfall of about 1 to 2 to 1 to 5, 1 to 1.2 to 1.5 billion, depending on which report you're looking at and which snapshot in time you're looking at it. Now, I don't know how many of you know California Congresswoman Katie Porter, who's now running for governor of California. She's kind of famous for using these whiteboards to explain concepts during congressional hearings, which you may have seen on TV. And I started channeling my inner Katie Porter, and I've started to make a series of short videos trying to explain in plain language these developments in our state budget. And I'm going to drop into the chat box the link to my latest video. And I'm going to plan to make more of these throughout the session as the budget progresses, because I think it's important to keep people updated on what's going on in plain language. The leadership of the General Assembly has made clear that there is not an appetite for any more tax or fee increases this year, which means we need to close this new gap of 1.2 to 1.5 billion with cuts alone. And our new speaker, Jocelyn Peña-Melnick, who we're all very excited about, the first Afro-Latina speaker, the first immigrant speaker, has empowered us with her strength and with her heart to make the tough decisions to balance our state budget, as Maryland always does, and we will get it done. The General Assembly considers thousands of bills each session, and there are many important policies reflected in those bills. But ultimately, whether we can fund those policies and programs and whether we can make them happen all really comes down to the budget. So, as folks have said many times, a budget really is a moral document. And while we will need to make tough choices because of the fiscal and the economic realities we're facing, we also need to make sure that the budget reflects our values and protects the priorities we believe in. The governor's proposed budget is due on January 21st. And once it arrives, we will start dissecting it and holding budget hearings for every single state agency and program. And I also serve with Delegate Palakovich Carr on the Joint Audit Committee, which also has a role to play in providing oversight of the state agencies
And
to
me.
ensure. I'm sorry?
And me.
Oh, I'm sorry. And Senator Kagan, who is also on the Joint Audit Committee. So 3 out of your 4 members from your delegation will be on that, working to provide oversight to the state agencies and programs to ensure that they are operating effectively and efficiently given the cost constraints that we have. Traditionally, the Assembly alternates each year as to which chamber tackles the budget first. And this year, it's the Senate. So the Senate will take the first crack at a solution that resolves the projected shortfall, and then it will come to the House to review, and the two bodies will work out their differences to reach a final budget compromise. So stay tuned for updates on the budget, and stay tuned for some more whiteboard videos. And I'm also working on a few bills of my own that I'm sponsoring to expand financial literacy and financial empowerment, to give local governments, like the 2 municipalities in our district, the tools to fairly regulate commercial property sales, and some bills to improve child safety and children's summer camps. And so more to come on that as we finalize those bills. But I'm looking forward to your questions, and I'm sure we'll talk more tonight about our plans to protect our immigrant communities and our other vulnerable Marylanders, and to spur growth and economic development and more affordable housing, to try to protect healthcare and expand affordability, as Delegate Vogel said. And most importantly, I think maybe to stand firm against what's going on in the federal government and lead the way against the abuses that we're seeing there. So thanks again for the privilege of representing you. And I'll turn it back to Senator Kagan. Thank you.
Nicely done. Thank you, Delegate Spiegel. Good job. Next up is going to be our own Delegate Julie Palakovich Carr. Delegate Palakovich Carr is the chair of the Montgomery County delegation, and she has a new leadership role in the House in the new administration, in the Peña-Melnick administration, that she'll tell you about. And she is, as you all know, is a former member of the Rockville City Council. Delegate Palakovich Carr, you are up.
Thank you, Senator Kagan, for the kind introduction. I will add my thanks to everyone who is here tonight. It is great to see you all and to just have such an engaged and active district to represent. And I apologize that my voice is scratchy. Like Delegate Vogel, I am also sick this week, although I don't think as sick as he is. So he's the real trooper here tonight. Well, it is, I'll say, I don't need to talk about just what trying times we are living through, but I continue to believe that Maryland really is a bright spot on so many fronts, and you've heard a good sampling of that from my two colleagues in the House, and I know Senator Kagan will share more as well. And I'll just put out here at the beginning that if there's an issue that we haven't raised, it really is because we expect we're going to have robust Q&A after our formal presentation. So, we want to hear the issues on your mind. And if there's something that we don't mention, it doesn't mean it's not important to us. We address a lot of issues over the course of the 90-day session. So let me just start actually with just a point of pride, since I do chair the Montgomery County House delegation. With the recent transition and unanimous election of our new speaker, Jocelyn Peña-Melnick, I will say I just feel a lot of pride in that I feel like the Montgomery County House delegation really is being seen in the House. We have many, many, many talented and smart and hardworking delegates who serve in our delegation, including my two district mates in the House and, of course, our senator as well. But even though we are the largest delegation in the House and are about a quarter of the majority party, we really have not seen that number and that strength as a group and individually reflected in leadership appointments throughout the House. But just in recent weeks, we have seen many, many of our members appointed to new leadership roles, and we have kind of increased our leadership roles across the board. So at this point, Montgomery County members from our delegation now chair 2 of the 7 standing main committees in the House. That's an increase from 1 previously. We have vice chairs of 3 of those committees. We now have 15 members who serve in subcommittee leadership positions. We still have the majority leader, as well as 5 of the deputy whips in the House, as well as a bunch of other positions. So I'm very proud as delegation chair to just see our county being seen and recognized. Among those transitions was one for me as well. For the last 3 sessions, I had the privilege under Speaker Adrian Jones to chair the Early Childhood Subcommittee. And that really was, I felt like an impactful subcommittee to be on, especially as my son is still fairly young. He's in the 5th grade now at MCPS, but I have transitioned to a new role as chairing the Revenues Subcommittee on the House Ways and Means Committee, which Delegate Vogel and I continue to serve on together. So that will be an important position this year, that even though no new taxes are on the table, there are certain ways, and I'll get into this in my comments tonight, of how we should be looking at our tax code for ways to save money that aren't new taxes, but perhaps taking a harder look at some prior tax breaks that we have given out, especially to big corporations and to really the wealthiest few in our state. Otherwise, my own personal legislative agenda for this session, I just want to highlight a few of the bills that I'm working on. I really think that perhaps 2 of the most impactful bills that I'm sponsoring this session really are directly pushing back and fighting back against the bad things coming out of the Trump administration and his cronies in Congress. I'll start with the tax issue, since I've mentioned that a little bit already. The big ugly bill that was enacted this summer didn't just give tax breaks to big corporations and to billionaires and millionaires. Unfortunately, many of those federal tax breaks actually flow down to our state revenues and impact our state revenues as well. So unless Maryland takes action, we actually are going to automatically give some of those same tax breaks to those same very wealthy entities. But we do definitely have the option. It is totally within our ability to say, no, thank you. We cannot afford these additional tax giveaways, and to stop them before they start in Maryland. So I'm sponsoring legislation on that front this session. It will save at least $330 million the first year. So that is an awful lot of public services that we can protect and prevent cuts that would really be impactful in terms of services that Marylanders rely on and depend on every day. The other piece of legislation that I'm sponsoring that's in direct response to actions by the Trump administration is in terms of environmental protection. And I know we have many, many dedicated environmentalists in District 17, and I very much appreciate that. I am a wildlife biologist by training, so I love when I actually get to work on legislation that is related to my educational roots in science. Actually, my master's thesis was studying a federally protected species, the Canada lynx. And I was going to school in Minnesota, and there are a few Canada lynx out in Minnesota. Well, fast forward to today, and I'm going to be sponsoring legislation this session to try to counteract the Trump administration's attacks on the Federal Endangered Species Act. We can't, stop what they're doing, although I did co-lead a national letter that legislators from, I think, 34 states signed on to from across the country, asking them to stop and to halt the rulemaking processes that they've put forward that really just undermine several foundational and key pieces of the Endangered Species Act. Everything from making sure that both endangered and threatened species have appropriate levels of protection, that we are ensuring that there are places for these species to live, that their habitats are protected. It's going to make it a lot harder, basically, to protect habitat and to ensure those kind of key protections at the federal level. Unfortunately, we can't stop that. But Maryland, like 48 other states, has its own state Endangered Species Act. So we can make sure that our state Endangered Species Act is good and strong. And I will just note, for folks who maybe aren't consider themselves environmentalists or don't think this might be the top issue for right now, I will point out that the rules that the Trump administration is trying to do away with were actually put in place mostly under the Reagan administration. It was Ronald Reagan's EPA, or excuse me, not EPA, Fish and Wildlife Service and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that put forth many of these rules. It was the second Bush administration who did more of them. So these weren't necessarily liberal policies when they were put in place. They really were bipartisan compromises. So that legislation should hopefully maintain what we've been doing in Maryland for literally decades, and really what the rest of the nation has been doing for decades. Otherwise, let me pivot to affordability, and I know my colleagues have spoken to this too. We know that many people are struggling right now. It is tough, whether you've directly lost a job or just dealing with the impacts of tariffs and escalating costs on everything. So I think you'll see many pieces of legislation dealing with different aspects of affordability this session. I'm working on a few. One, we know energy prices are crazy. I kind of dread seeing what my Pepco bill is going to be each month. One aspect I'll say in Maryland, there's multiple factors, but certainly data centers are not helping with our electricity affordability. And unfortunately, in Maryland, about 5 years ago, the state created tax breaks to try to incentivize data centers to come to Maryland. It was before, it was starting to grow as an industry in Virginia, but before it really took off, and I think people were aware of really what the negative impacts were going to be. So this bill will just end those tax breaks. If data centers are going to come to Maryland, they certainly should be paying their full freight. I would also support a multitude of other reforms that I think are going to be on the table this session that other colleagues are sponsoring about renewable energy and other pieces on the environmental impacts. Secondly, I'm bringing back legislation from this last session that would prevent landlords from using artificial intelligence to illegally collude to set rent prices. There are many ongoing lawsuits. The federal government has actually settled with some of these entities. The state still has an active lawsuit, but unfortunately the practice continues in Maryland and elsewhere, where landlords are using software to kind of get around the law and to jack up rent prices because they know what their competitors are doing, and that should not be happening. And then lastly, I have another bill in the healthcare space. Unfortunately, with many Marylanders, and actually about 25,000 residents in our district had depended on the federal tax credits for health insurance. And with the expiration of those credits, we know many more folks are going to be struggling to pay for their medical bills. I have legislation that's going to put in place some consumer protections for people who are taking advantage of these specialty credit cards that are particularly for medical expenses. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot of the baseline protections that other credit cards do. And we just want to make sure that consumers are protected on that front. So as I wrap up here, let me just say, all of us are here, our offices, our staff are here to help you if you are having any issues on any front. And even if it's something where you're not sure we're the right people to come to, or you have, a neighbor who's having issues paying their utility bill, whatever it is, we're here to serve. Please send in your questions, send in your requests. We're here for you. But thank you.
Thank you, Delia Palakovich Carr, as always. I wanted to first off thank you again for for taking the time and being with us this evening. I want to recognize, before we go on and before I take my turn, I want to recognize some of the elected officials who are with us. I think Delegate Vogel mentioned that both of our mayors, Gaithersburg's wonderful mayor, Judd Ashman, who was just reelected in November, and Rockville's amazing mayor, Monique Ashton. They are called the Ash Twins, and people mess up their names all the time. They work together very closely, which makes life just so joyous. They are both at a mayoral event with the Maryland Municipal League, so that's why they are not with us. But from Rockville, we do have Council Member Adam Van Grack and Council Member Barry Jackson. So thank you both for being with us. From the Central Committee, our hardworking Central Committee colleague, Jason Spiegel, and then Jennifer Hosey is with us as well. County Council Member Evan Glass is with us. And I know that Council Members Friedson and Jawando wanted to be here but couldn't. So thank you, Council Member Glass, for making the time to join us. So with that, I'm going to run through the delegates set things up so well, and I know you guys have learned so much about all that's before us, but I'm going to give you a sense from my perspective and the Senate across the hall. So first, I am still Vice Chair of Triple E or E Quad, Education, Energy, and the Environment, and Elections, which is the role I've held since 2019. I work very closely in a lot of caucuses, work groups, and commissions. I chaired 2 work groups over the interim, one on 911 and one on 311. Wanted to also mention that all of us are very active on social media. We want to encourage you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and find us all over. I have my podcast, Kibitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. And so I hope you'll subscribe, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. We do everything from political folks to musicians to community leaders, nonprofit folks, even Scrabble. The budget issues, I think that Delegate Spiegel led us off really well on that. ICE activity is horrifying, and we are going to be pushing back, as has been mentioned already. So I'm going to run through some of the bills that I'm working on. So my top priority, which has been in the press a fair amount, is a statewide 311 using artificial intelligence in order to lighten the load on our 911 centers. As you've heard me say, for the last 11 years, 3 people have died in our district when 911 has failed, including our friend, Rockville environmental activist, Carl Henn. And so if literally your house was on fire, if your baby wasn't breathing, or you had just been attacked, you want to call 911 and have someone send police, fire, or paramedics right away. You don't want to be put on hold. And yet sometimes that's what happens. You get Muzak, and that's not okay. So we need to make sure that people can get their questions that are not emergencies answered easily. Literally, when people don't know who else to call, they call 911. What time does the library close? Where can I get a flu shot? Where can I early vote? Really basic questions. It passed unanimously through the work group I chaired, and it is being sponsored in the Senate and in the House in bipartisan manner, which is too rare these days. We're also working to make sure that our first responders, our 911 specialists, have better retirement because they have a crazy hard job, and we need to honor them better and encourage them to stay on the job and under the headset. I'm often described as the senator for the nonprofit sector. I work very closely with them, and I have 4 nonprofit bills this year. I'm not going to go into each of them, but I do want to let you know that if you are engaged in the nonprofit community, the first of 3 of my bill hearings is happening next Wednesday. Well, we need to, okay. And then elections, another lane that I have 11 election bills this year, which might turn into 12. Next Wednesday, we are having our hearing on the constitutional amendment to make sure that our legislators are elected rather than selected by party leaders. And so our own Ryan Spiegel was nominated by the Democratic Central Committee, and he's awesome. But whenever possible, when a vacancy happens early enough in a 4-year term, the voters should be picking their legislators. We want to make sure that ballot language is simple so that voters know what they're being asked to consider before they cast a ballot. All of these bills that I'm talking about now have passed the Senate multiple times unanimously. Because of the changes in the House, I am optimistic that they will be moving forward in the House this year, and hopefully many of these will end up on the governor's desk. Maryland Civic Excellence, Delegate Vogel and I are sponsoring that again. Again, has gotten through the Senate multiple times unanimously. I think this will be the year. Consumer protection is something that I also work on. So gas price gouging, which I talked about for several years here, we passed the bill, it was signed into law, but it turns out the enforcement was a challenge and the language wasn't precise enough. So we're coming back with a little tweak on that. And then the last piece that I want to mention is legislative bond initiatives. And there is not going to be as much money this year. So the expectations have to be tamped down a little bit. But we, the four of us, are going to work really hard to bring home the bacon, as we tend to do, on worthy capital projects. So Young Audiences, which is a really cool arts organization in Rockville, Rockville Bridges in need of repair, the Twin Brook Bridge, the Lincoln Park School, which is historic, 12 South Summit in Gaithersburg, and then the county-wide Montgomery History is building beautiful new space that is going to be an asset to everyone. So with that, I'm going to stop, but there's a lot going on that gives you a snippet of what we're working on. And so with that, I just want to thank you again for being here, and I'm going to read a couple of questions, and I just want to so take a breath. So I'm going to start with a question from Stacy Wells in Rockville, which is, what will you be doing this session to increase the supply of affordable and attainable housing? And I'm going to ask any of the delegates who wants to take that one. Delegate Palakovich Carr, you want to take it?
Actually, I'll defer to Delegate Spiegel first. I'll go after him.
Go for it. Ryan?
I'm sure Delegate Palakovich Carr will have more to say, but I'll just say, sort of in general, the governor has introduced a package of bills to continue his administration's effort to make it easier to construct supply of housing and a variety of supply, on the belief, the basic sort of market economics, that one of the key ways that we drive down the cost of housing is by building more housing and making sure that we're building more housing of the type that is affordable rather than just more single-family homes. And so there's a package of bills that essentially makes it easier and creates more incentives and more streamlining of zoning decisions and planning decisions to be able to build, particularly on state property or on property that is around existing transit infrastructure. And I think there's going to be broad support for those bills. We'll see if they get amended and what form they take if they finally pass in the legislature. But the leadership at the top is supporting these efforts. And so I think we are going to see some more movement on those types of bills to try to advance housing affordability that way.
And actually, I was also going to mention the governor's package. My colleague did a great job there. I'll just give our governor some kudos. I really feel like housing and housing affordability has been a big issue for the Moore Miller administration, and the legislative package this session actually builds on an executive order that they issued over the summer on this front. So I know that they continue to push, and I think maybe the key difference, we had a little bit of a logjam this last session on housing bills, but as my colleague mentioned, leadership is on board. And I also think, importantly, that the Maryland Association of Counties, which represents all 24 counties in the state, has worked on the development of this legislation too. So hopefully we'll actually get something more meaningful passed this year.
Great. Delegate Vogel, you're good?
Yeah, just quickly, and one of those bills, the Housing Certainty Act, sponsored by Delegate Baylor, I know I'm co-sponsoring. That's one of the governor's priority bills around housing. And then I really have to give kudos to Delegate Palakovich Carr, because I think the issue of surveillance pricing and the AI surveillance pricing in the housing market in particular, which she mentioned earlier, where you can't have 10 landlords come to a room together and determine what price they want to set for different rents. But if there's an algorithm doing that in the background, that's legal. So Delegate Palakovich Carr's bill would ban that, and that's a really big deal for renters in particular.
Thank you very much. Okay, next question I am going to pull out is from Andrew Messick. With the budget deficit being the main issue again this cycle, what cuts are you expecting to be proposed, and what do you think needs to be done? So I'm going to toss this to Delegate Spiegel first, since he's our budget guru, and then if anyone else wants to take a hack at it.
Well, we don't really know yet. I'm sorry that that's the answer, but on January 21st, we will know a lot more because that's when the governor's proposed operating budget and his proposed capital budget will be delivered to us and will be made public. Look, we've heard statements from the governor in the recent days that he's going to, in this proposed budget, he is going to still have extremely significant, possibly record investments in public safety and in education. There's still going to be resources. I mean, we're not like totally broke. So I think we're going to see there's going to be significant investment in the priorities that we care about. I think there's also going to be some careful thought about how we account for certain funds. I hate to suggest that, anything is gimmicky, but I think the reality of anybody who has had to go through an accounting process to understand different buckets for different funds, things like Metro funding, for example, which Maryland provides a significant amount for, as well as DC and Virginia as part of our pact to continue to fund the Metro system, might end up moving from our operating budget to our capital budget. And even though it will be the same amount of money, that will free up certain leverage that we have to be able to use more funds in our operating budget for other purposes. And because our capital budget is funded differently and leverages bonding authority and other sources of funding, that may free up some operating funding to continue to invest in other priorities. So we're going to see on January 21st what the governor's administration is doing on all those things. It is a significant challenge. And we are going to be strapped for cash this year, but I don't want anyone to think that it's going to be so dire that we will have to zero out significant programs. I think there's going to be some pain across the board on a number of programs that we care about, but I think there's still going to be significant funding for our priorities.
Thank you, Delegate Spiegel. While you've got the spotlight here, why don't you speak? Wonderful Nina Liakos from Gaithersburg asked about SNAP benefits, as well as funding for programs that support people with disabilities, hoping to keep people out of institution, live their best life. And I have to say, yesterday's cut everything and then, oh, never mind. Why don't you see if you can speak to any of that? What are we going to do for people with disabilities in these tight fiscal times?
Well, I think what I've heard from the governor's administration is that they learned a valuable lesson last year, and that they've really made an effort, particularly with their new budget secretary, Jake Weissman, who many of us have worked with and know well, to do advanced outreach to particularly the developmental disabilities community and have conversations early on about what budget ramifications are going to look like for folks who rely on those important services and funds. I don't think they're going to be completely untouched, to just be completely honest and candid with you. But I think a significant portion, a majority of the funding is going to still be there to support folks in need. The question of how much, I don't know yet. But I do appreciate that there has been much more effort to communicate with advocates in that community, with folks who rely on that support, to make sure that it is a conversation and a collaboration to try to reach a compromise instead of a surprise, which I think is what many in the community felt last year. I will also just mention on SNAP benefits, the Appropriations Committee obviously had a very important hearing in the fall after the president announced that he was suddenly going to be slashing SNAP benefits, and were able to convince the governor to exercise his emergency authority to spend about 60 or 70 million dollars from the emergency. I'm sorry, did I say 60 or 70? Was it 600 to 700 million? No, 60 to 70 million, because it was 1 month of SNAP benefits to be supplemented by state funding when there was no federal funding in the fall. And of course, that has now been rolled back. And so the federal funding is back on the table. But we were able to use our rainy day fund to help fund SNAP benefits during the fall during that emergency.
Senator, if I can jump in quickly.
Of
Two
course.
things. One, Nina, I know I have your contact info. We're texting already. We'll see what we can do to help answer that specific question you had around SNAP. And on the budget, actually all three of us on the House side, Delegate Spiegel, Delegate Palakovich Carr, and I sit on the committees that are going to have some degree of oversight on the budget on both revenues and spending, which includes budget hearings. I think we made significant cuts last year, as Delegate Spiegel mentioned, and I think we did it while still respecting our values and not compromising those values. And I love our governor, but we had to push back pretty hard last year. And I know both the appropriations and Ways and Means committees did just that to make sure that both on the revenue side and on the spending side, we weren't impacting DDA or education spending to the extent that was initially proposed. That'll happen again this year. That process will happen again this year. So as there are concerns that you all have over what is proposed, let us know. And those are questions that we can raise in those budget hearings.
And if I can also just add on that one too, I think the issue of the support for Marylanders who have very severe disabilities and other kind of foundational and very key government services shows why it's important that we aren't just looking at what can we cut from existing programs, but also taking a hard look at the tax side of it. And again, that it's been made clear from lots of folks in leadership that doesn't mean new taxes, but taking a hard look at the tax breaks that we're already offering. So in addition to the decoupling bill I mentioned, to say no thanks to some of the provisions in the big ugly bill, I have another piece of legislation that I'm working on that takes the recommendations of our Department of Legislative Services on a bunch of different tax credits that have been enacted over the years, with good intentions of largely trying to spur economic development. But the thing is when we actually take a look years later, sometimes decades after these programs have been in effect, and to see how they're working, unfortunately, some of them are not, yet they continue on. They're like these zombie tax credits, and it adds up to millions of dollars a year. That alone is not going to fix the budget. But again, I hope that we're going to be able to make some progress on things like that so that we can avert much more harmful cuts in other places.
Ready? Here we go. Okay. Thank you all. The next question, I want to thank everybody who asked this, and I'm going to read some of the names because I want you to know that we see you and we appreciate those who submitted questions in advance. So Allison Beeman from Gaithersburg, Diane Fuchs, Aileen Klein, Marinda Schwartz, Jill Descan from Rockville, and Gaithersburg, all asked about the status of death with dignity, compassionate choice, end of life options, whatever you call it, it's critically important. And I'm going to start this one, and then if any of my delegates want to pipe up. For me, this is just as strongly held a belief as being pro-choice when it comes to abortion. It's my body, and I believe there should be protections for older people like me, for people with disabilities, that we've got to make sure that there are lots of protections and a careful process. But many other states, including most recently Illinois and New York, that now have end-of-life options. I think it's humane and it's appropriate. So there are many people of all faiths who are supportive and leaders on this issue. And as some folks say, we're all only one awful death away from being a big supporter. When we watch our loved ones battle for years in pain with a declining capacity to live independently, to feed or toilet themselves, it's just tragic. So several years ago, the House passed it narrowly, and it died in the Senate on a tie vote. We have 47 senators, and it was 23 to 23. And there was one person who chose not to vote, one of my Senate colleagues. So it has been a very narrowly contested issue. That was under a Governor Hogan administration, and it was unclear whether he would even sign the bill into law. Governor Wes Moore has been very clear that he is an ally on this issue. So we have to get the bill to his desk. Jocelyn Peña-Melnick, Speaker Peña-Melnick, is a strong supporter and had worked with the lead sponsor in years past. We just have to see if we can get it out of the Senate. And the question is whether an election year is there going to be some people who are too nervous to vote for it, or I would love to see too nervous to vote against it. We'll see what happens. But I am a strong supporter and doing whatever I can. We've got some new senators who have not cast a vote on this issue before, and I am hoping that they are going to hear from their constituents that that is something that they support. Do any of the delegates want to speak up?
I'll just say I think we've all been on the record as being strong supporters of the bill, and remain so.
Okay. Delegate Spiegel, you have not been in office for that. Do you want to speak to it?
I support the bill.
Excellent. Okay. Delegate Vogel, you want to just do a me too?
Amen.
Okay. All right. The next issue we are going to talk about is redistricting. And I want to thank everybody who has who submitted questions on that. And I'm going to read a bunch of the names again. I want to make sure. So my friend and neighbor Ron Tipton, Susan Dunn in Gaithersburg, David Winfield, hi, Catherine Sindos, Cornelia Skipton, many others want to know what our positions are on redistricting. And the four of us are generally aligned on many, many issues. On this one, we are not. So I'll let the delegates go first and then I'll debt cleanup. Which of you want to kick off on this? Delegate Vogel, I'll call on you then since no one's speaking up.
Sure. I will say generally I am strongly opposed to partisan gerrymandering. And I think it's important to note that back when Democrats held the majority in Congress, one of the first bills that were passed, H.R. 1, banned partisan gerrymandering nationwide. And there actually was legislation before Congress this year that would have also taken action to ban partisan gerrymandering. Um, Unfortunately, the political reality that we're living in right now is that you have states like Texas, Florida, we can keep naming them, right, that are pursuing their own unprecedented mid-decade redistricting to give them a political advantage in the 2026 elections. And we know why they're doing that. It's because their policies are so unpopular, whether it's healthcare Medicaid cuts or SNAP cuts, or now the failure to extend the ACA credits, or just the extreme corruption that we're seeing from DC. They know that if they didn't change the rules, if they didn't change the maps, they would lose overwhelmingly in the 2026 midterms. What I would have loved to see in an ideal world, ideally, would have been action at the federal level to preempt this issue and stop partisan gerrymandering in states across the country. But in knowing that that wasn't possible was, maybe governors coming together and saying, if you don't do it, we won't do it, and coming to this point of saying, we're understanding the mutually assured destruction here, so we're all going to take a step back. That hasn't happened, and we're also on the cusp now, I'll say, of potentially the Voting Rights Act being reversed by the Supreme Court, which further complicate. I mean, not only is that a huge concern from a racial representation standpoint, but from a democratic representation standpoint, we could be losing many seats. So I think this is not a moment for us to, as Democrats, tie our hands behind our back and hope for the best. We really need to use the power that we have. And if that means considering redistricting this session to give us one additional Democratic seat here in the state of Maryland to offset the 4 seats that we're seeing in Texas and who knows how many more to come, then I think that's what we should do.
Okay.
Can I-
So either the delegates dying to speak, or should I give the counterpoint here?
I was just going to give a ditto.
Okay.
Well,
Ditto and ditto.
I just wanted to weigh in briefly on an issue that I was discussing a couple of weeks ago on
On redistricting.
yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
the I Hate Politics podcast.
Mhm.
If you haven't listened to it, it's maybe second to Kibitzing with Kagan, but it's a good one also to listen to hear about different issues and conversations that are happening in the county and in the state. But as a lawyer, not that I have a monopoly on interpreting the law, but as a lawyer, I've looked at the case law history from the 2021, 2022 redistricting fight under Governor Hogan. And my take is that the concern that some are expressing that if we were to redistrict and it were to be challenged in court, that not only would the new map that we adopt be at risk, but the current map that we're currently using could also be at risk. I don't actually buy that.
Oh.
I've looked I don't. I'm just
I love that, Ryan. You were almost starting to make my case.
sorry. Well, my view, having looked at the case law in Maryland, having looked at the language of the state constitution, and in particular, having looked at recent decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court interpreting the concept of compactness, which is one of the requirements when drawing districts that they be compact, indicates that partisan gerrymandering, whatever you think of it morally, is legally permissible, and therefore, as a result, there's really no basis to unwind our current map, which, by the way, has already been in place
Ryan,
for a number of
my
years.
turn. Thank you. All right. So the House has made its position clear. The governor has made his position clear. Let me make my position clear because I'm aligned. The vast majority of the Senate does not agree. Let me start by saying, do I think we need Democratic majority in Congress so as to provide checks and balances against the crazy, cruel, short-sighted policies of the Trump-Vance administration? Absolutely. Do I think that Maryland can be part of the solution? No. And there are so many reasons. So for all the reasons, first off, the Democratic and Republican primary elections are in June. To try to draw a map, pass a map, have it get through the courts, which it would go to, because at least the Republicans and probably a lot more folks would take it to court. And a lot of us believe that the map and what Delegate Spiegel said before he debunked his own words, the concern is that they would throw out our 7 Democrats to 1 Republican current map, as well as our proposed effort at building an 8-0 map. And even if we drew the most perfect map, we still need someone who could beat Congressman Andy Harris, which is no small feat. For all those reasons, those are some of the arguments back last fall. Today, I'm going to give you even more important arguments, which is we are in the middle of the legislative session. We have so much to focus on in terms of the budget, education, transportation, healthcare, civil rights, and so much more, that any time that we spend with a long shot effort at trying to redraw maps means we're not working on those issues, and we will run out of time. I think it's more important that we are focused on the people's business and not redrawing maps. So I hope that the Senate will stand strong and that we will stay focused on policy and not on politics in this election year. So with that, we do have a question. Meryl, you put in the chat. I just want to get back to that. Meryl Azrael asked about, I want to read her words. She asked about ranked choice voting, which is something that Delegate Palakovich Carr, actually all of us have cared about and worked on. Let me just do briefly, I have a ranked choice voting bill this year. It does not mandate RCV for anyone. It does not, it is going to be a very long process. The exciting part is that there are a number of municipalities, including Gaithersburg and Rockville, that are considering implementing RCV, ranked choice voting, in the future. Annapolis, Greenbelt, Bowie, I think that Frederick, there are a number of municipalities that are looking at it. So my bill simply, and I had budget language that I added to the budget 2 years ago that just that came up with a study that said, yeah, you ought to do this legislatively. My legislation would say next time you get any new election hardware or software, it must be RCV compliant, because there's no reason to spend taxpayer money to have a municipality or a county say they want to use ranked choice voting, and then the excuse is, oh, we can't tabulate using this hardware or software. So very small bill. It may mean that no one else implements, but if they do, if there's a local jurisdiction that decides to go with ranked choice voting, the hardware and software will be compliant and able to be used. Delia Palakovich Carr, do you want to go from there? Do you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just mention that once again, there is a local bill specific to Montgomery County that would allow Montgomery County to opt in to use ranked choice voting or approval voting for any of the county or local elections, not municipal, but county seats. That bill has passed our House delegation many, many, many years in a row unanimously, but unfortunately has not moved in the full House. So, stay tuned on that, but that bill is back again this session.
Thank you, Delegate. I want to acknowledge that Jovi Lopez, who is another member of the Central Committee, has joined us. So thank you, Jovi, for your work. And Chris Hager talked about redistricting. The risk is greater because we could lose a seat, and it's more important that we keep District 6. So I also agree with that. Thank you, Chris. Good point. With that, I'm going to put I'm going to see if anyone has a question that is burning that we want to make sure that we hear about before we start our wrap-up comments. I am looking for hands raised. Jill Deskin, why don't you go ahead and no speeches, brief question. Go for it. You don't need to unmute yourself.
I
Thank
did.
you.
I want to go back to the compassionate choice bill.
Okay.
Everyone's for it, but is there a bill that has been presented and who's the sponsor?
So I know in the Senate, Senator Smith has been the sponsor. Any of the delegates know whether the speaker is carrying it this year or who is?
I don't think any of us have information on the House side, but Jill, if you send any of us a follow-up email, we'll find out for you.
It's a great question. Thank you.
Still a little early, so we haven't been able to see which bills our colleagues are sponsoring yet for the most part.
Okay.
Right,
Thank you.
right. Councilmember Van Grack or Jackson, do you want to do a 2-second thing on anything that's interesting and relevant that Rockville is doing? I referenced the legislative bond initiatives. Barry Jackson, you want to, give us 2 seconds here.
Yeah, so the only things that comes to mind is this Monday is Martin Luther King Jr. Day nationwide, and the Rockville is going to have an event from 8:30 until 12 at the F. Scott Fitzgerald Theater to honor Martin Luther King and to generate some hope that we need in this time of for our nation. So we invite everybody to come out to F. Scott Theater, the Fitzgerald Theater, from 8:30 to noon. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member, and thank you for being here. I think that the answer that the question that I want us to end on, and then each of the four of us will do quick wrap-ups. Kim Lenarski from Gaithersburg, and there were several that asked similar questions, but I'd like to get an understanding of what are some realistic options to fight the Trump regime at the state level, particularly ICE. Is there any legislation in the works that needs community support and feedback? Delia Palakovich Carr, do you want to start us on that one?
Yeah, and I know some folks were continuing to join us as we got going, and Delegate Vogel mentioned this, I think, right at the top of the call. There is legislation coming back to end ICE agreements between local, like county police and ICE, as well as to bar ICE agents from wearing masks. That's modeled off of California legislation. I think our colleague, Delegate Nicole Williams, is carrying the bill in the House. So we will expect to see that, but there may be other pieces as well. So stay tuned. I know, members of this delegation, we care deeply about our immigrant community, and I think we all were co-sponsors of the several pieces of legislation last year, some of which did pass to protect our immigrant neighbors.
Thank you, Delegate. I will just mention that in the Senate, it's the President Pro Tem that is sponsoring that bill on masks. I am a co-sponsor of it, and to show you the importance of it, it is Senate Bill 1. Senate Bill 1. The President of the Senate controls the first 10, and I'm really honored that I have Senate Bill 4 and Senate Bill 5. And I will talk about that in my closing. Delegate Spiegel wants to add something?
Thank you, Senator. I also just wanted to point out that Delegate Moon is working on a bill that, as I understand it, would track digital footprints of ICE agents and their operations so that if, God forbid, something like what happened in Minnesota were to happen here, the ability to go after those ICE agents for legal liability would be strengthened so that the evidence essentially would exist in the digital formats to be able to go after them for civil liability as well. So it's another tool to try and create a disincentive for ICE doing those kinds of things in Maryland. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it's an interesting one that we ought to pay attention to and see if it's worth supporting. And then let me just add, one of the important things we do through our budget is we support the Attorney General's office in the state of Maryland. And the state Attorney General has been bringing lots of litigation in federal courts to push back against not only the ICE policies and actions of the Trump administration, but many of the different policies and actions of the Trump administration. And while we don't have a lot of faith in our U.S. Supreme Court, the lower courts have been very proactive, at least for now, to be able to slow down or stop some of these worst policies from the Trump administration. And it can take years to get up to the Supreme Court. So at least for now, we need to continue to support our Attorney General in litigating these matters and in trying to get injunctions to stop or slow down these policies, which we've been quite successful at doing so far.
Love it. Thank you. That's well said. And the Attorney General not only brings lawsuits himself, but partners with other attorneys general around the country. So, okay. So here's what I want to do. We're going to go around the horn. We're each going to take 2 minutes, and I'm going to even set a timer so we'll get you guys to bed at a reasonable time. Robin, I see you. I know that animals are an important agenda item this year, and you've been a leader on that. I know that there's so many important leaders. Barry Kasnitz on firefighters. I mean, you guys, there's so many wonderful, hardworking advocates in this room. And thank you, Kathy Eaton, for what you do for social workers, and Nina for the environment and all the things, and Joyce for people with disabilities. So love seeing so many friends from home. We miss you when we're in Annapolis. So 2 minutes each. Let's see, let's go, we'll just go in the same order. Delegate Vogel, I am setting the timer, 2 minutes on the clock. Please go ahead and any wrap-ups anything we didn't mention or anything else that you'd like to mention. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to thank everyone again. I've spent the last 9 months in between last session and this session in the community, meeting with many of you, hearing from many of you, seeing many of you, whether it's waving signs on the bridges above 270 or going to No Kings rallies or organizing in a number of different ways. And I think two of the biggest dangers and threats that we face right now as a state and as a country is fear and cynicism. The fear to be involved. There is nothing that this federal government wants more than for you to be afraid to be involved and show up at meetings like this or show up to make your voices heard. And when that fear takes over, that's when, fascism and dictatorships can really take control. And none of you on this call have been afraid over the last year, and you continue to be out there really with a great deal of courage. And the cynicism, right? I hear from my colleagues on this call who are meeting this moment with courage and understanding that even when it feels like there's nothing that we can do and like we are doomed and overwhelmed by the chaos and cruelty that we're seeing in this moment, my colleagues and all of you on this call understand that we can't be cynical, that we have to keep working, that we have to keep fighting, and we have no other choice if we want to save this country and save our democracy for future generations. So thank you all so much for being here and for all you do.
Thank you so much, Delegate Vogel. And I didn't sing your praises before at the beginning when you started. So Delegate Vogel's on the Ways and Means Committee and is just a thoughtful, progressive leader who speaks out for working families and all that. So I already did my bragging about Palakovich Carr and Spiegel, but Vogel also just a fabulous leader. So let's see. Delegate Spiegel, 2 minutes for you.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you again, everyone participating, for taking your time to be here and to be engaged. To piggyback on what Delegate Vogel was talking about, we have heard from a number of folks who are struggling around in the dark for hope in a difficult time. And that's understandable. And part of our job is to help inspire that hope, but also to gather that hope together and have it inspire us in the work that we do. They say that necessity is the mother of invention. And if you've ever read any of the Federalist Papers or any of the commentary on our Constitution, you know that the states are laboratories of democracy. Our job is to figure out creative ways to implement our democratic values. And that is exactly what Maryland is doing right now. And the other thing that we're doing that I'm seeing every day is that even in the wake of these big national challenges and international challenges, people are turning more and more towards their local and state communities. And the simple act of volunteering at a food shelter or going to check on your neighbor or being engaged in your faith community to do some project in your local community is bringing people back together and empowering them to feel hope. And so I hope that you have the opportunity to do that as well, and also to continue to engage with us and advocate with us as we innovate to protect Marylanders from what's going on nationally and internationally.
Thank you. And Delegate Palakovich Carr.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, too, for being here tonight. I will just say that we appreciate your input, the emails and calls that you send to us, to our offices and our staff. Again, if there's ever anything that we can do to help, please just reach out. And if you're interested in being more active on state legislation, maybe in testifying on legislation or anything like that, sorry, my Google Home's going off in the background, please just reach out to any of us. We're happy to help facilitate that. My guess is Senator Kagan's going to promote an upcoming event, so I will leave that to her to speak to an opportunity to come to Annapolis, but our doors are literally open every day. If you're going to be in Annapolis, come, please let us know, and we'd love to see you. Otherwise, I'll just promote that every year our offices have funding available to give out for scholarships for residents of our district. You don't have to be a traditional undergraduate student to get that money. You could be somebody who's changing careers and going back to school, somebody who's going part-time, say at Montgomery College, whatever it is. If you or someone you know might benefit from those scholarships, please reach out. I think our scholarships will be opening up for applications soon if they aren't already, but each of us have funding available for our local residents on that front. But again, thanks everybody for being here tonight.
Thank you, Delia Palakovich Carr, and I will wrap us up here. It's hard to do the spotlighting and the talking and the timer and all the things, but it is so worth it to be able to be with all of you. So again, I want to flag the chat and thank you, Gabe Tuckhorn, for putting in the chat two bills that I have low bill numbers, Senate Bill 4 and Senate Bill 5. Senate Bill 4 is in response to the Trump administration that somehow thinks that nonprofit organizations should get involved in party politics. That's crazy, and we want to stop that at the Maryland border. This is a Kagan-Ferguson bill. I have never in all my years had a bill just me and the presiding officer. Bill Ferguson is the president of the Senate, and that's how important the bill this is. And it has a bill number lower than 10. So that's going to be important, and I'm very hopeful that we will be moving forward and that Maryland will be a national leader on that. The special elections bill I've already talked about, so that our legislators are elected rather than selected. The portal on my website, cherylkagan.org, is available, whether it's vote for or against a bill, whether you want to let us know that you're going to come to Annapolis and you want to be able to stop by and give us a heads up, or whether you're having a challenge with state government and we might be able to help you. My staff is really great at all that, and many of our staffs are already on. I want to give a huge shout out to my hardworking team, and they've just jumped right in and getting things done. We have a lot of bills. And the last thing that Delia Palakovich Carr just referenced is about, and unfortunately it wasn't on my, so January 25th, 26th, somebody correct me?
26th.
26th, thank you, is a Monday night. And I don't know how many hot dates you guys have on a Monday night. I think the best place to be is in Annapolis with the four of us. We'll buy you dinner. We'll give you a behind the scenes tour of the Senate and House. You can watch us in session. Rockville has a bus that's coming down. You can sign up for that. My email has that. We also have put that out on social media, but you can contact our office if you, or just contact City Hall if you want to sign up to join the Rockville bus. That'll bring you down and back safely. But we would love, love, love to have you all come down and join us. So with that, is there anything else that we have missed? Any of you? Are we good? With that, this will be available on my YouTube channel, and I really want to thank everyone for being with us this evening. This has been a lot of fun. We appreciate your thoughtfulness, your engagement, and your great questions. So thank you for caring about our democracy in these crazy, crazy times. Stay well, stay safe, and stay active. Good night.